Everyone has a story. I get them to tell it. Welcome to the Aron Bender Podcast, conversations with media personalities about their personal and professional lives and journeys. Thank you so much for your support, whether you're listening on your favorite platform or watching nightly at 11 p.m. Pacific or 2 a.m. Eastern on DB&A TV at dbandatelevision.tv or streaming with the DB&A TV app on Amazon Fire, Roku, and Apple TV, or on demand on YouTube at the Aron Bender Podcast channel. Before we get to my conversation with Kerri Kasem, a little about my story. I'm a widowed dad of two girls who just lost their mom, a grieving husband, a man in recovery trying to reconnect with the world with fresh eyes, faith, and perspective, a college journalism professor, a white guy in a world of injustice, a 20-year broadcast media veteran who had his dream job and then lost it. A year and a half ago, God gave me a gift, an opportunity to stop, step back, and breathe so I could learn about love, vulnerability, forgiveness, grace, self-care, patience, and understanding. Kerri Kasem is the executive producer of Bitter Blood, Kasem versus Kasem, a new 8-part documentary podcast available on Audible. It looks at the final years and death of Kerri's famous father, the legendary Casey Kasem, and the fight over his care and the care of others in his position. Casey died 7 years ago today, June 15th, 2014, which was that year Father's Day, and every year World Elder Abuse Awareness Day.
It's just a story that I've been telling for 7 years, and this time it's not going to be told just by me anymore. It's going to be told by the depositions of the doctors, the nurses, the caretakers, my dad's friends, what you would have heard if we would have gone to trial.
Why didn't it go to trial?
There is a lot of reasons why it didn't go to trial. I'm not happy about them. And I'm actually trying to change it legally, I can't talk about it too much because it is going to court.
Yeah. So take me back several years. I mean, it's 7 years now that you've been fighting over your father's care, your father's death, your father's estate. Take me back to just leading up to when he got the sickest, and when all of a sudden it became a fight between you and your mom, or you and his wife, I should say.
Sure, yeah. Well, when my dad got sick enough in 2013, my stepmother basically said nobody's going to see him. And it wasn't just us kids. It was his friends, his family members, his coworkers, people that have known him his whole life. She literally shut the gates of the house and fired his staff, took away his phone, his computer, everything that he used to communicate, and nobody could get a hold of him. So we tried for months. Then we had a protest outside of his house. And when I say protest, it was quiet. Most of his friends are in their 70s or 80s. And we were just standing there with signs saying, Gene, why won't you let me see my dad? Gene, I miss my brother. Casey's friend is 63 years. Casey's friends of, 50 years. Casey's assistant and right-hand man of 27 years. Nobody could see him. So, I thought that if I let the world know, because I knew this was going to break in the media. I knew the news would get a hold of it. But if I could break in the media that it's all of his friends and family, not just us kids, nobody could see my dad, that people would understand it's not kids against stepmom against kids, which, it was very important to me that people knew it was nobody could get a hold of my dad.
Yeah, because a lot of people, whether it's Hollywood or otherwise, they hear stepmom versus kids or vice versa, and they're like, it's just a family dispute. They didn't really like each other or whatever. But it sounds like your dad was taken onto an island, as we've talked before, long before this podcast, the idea that he was taken onto an island against his will. And at sometimes you didn't even know where that island was.
Right. She used all the nursing homes, hospitals as babysitters for my dad. And unfortunately, my dad wanted to be home. He had enough money to have round-the-clock care and to be in a place he wanted to be with his family surrounding him. But she put him in different facilities around the city. And when I became conservator guardian, when I finally won that after 8 months, I got to see all of the medical records and what she had done to my father. And it was disgusting. and sad and pathetic. And she had let him, just left him for weeks or months at a time without any visitation because she had a boyfriend. So her boyfriend moved into my dad's house and her boyfriend was driving my dad's car. And this is what you're going to hear on the podcast. And it's not going to come from me anymore. It's going to come from eyewitnesses, people with depositions. And it's a very cathartic thing. And I have to thank Audible. It's an Audible original. They had the courage to do it. And Eliza Rosen, who is the executive producer, that said, this has got to be on air. We've got to tell this story so people know what really happened. So both Eliza and Audible, I give full credit to. I mean, I had the case put together for 6 years. I had a documentary I was doing, but it seemed like people were only interested in, well, if there's a trial, we'll cover it. But what if there's not a trial? What if we don't get a chance to talk about what really happened? And, you know, Eliza, she's amazing. And we worked so well together and we got this out there. It took us a year and I'm very proud of it.
And before we get away from the series itself, I do want to ask, Martin Kove is narrator, of course, Cobra Kai and Karate Kid star, one of, growing up in the 80s. I think I've seen that man on film more than even myself. And I've taken a lot of selfies. I've taken a lot of videos of myself. I think I've seen that man, Ralph Macchio, and Billy Zabka on film more than anybody else in my entire life. Talk about how meaningful it was as a family friend to have him narrate. And how did that relationship come about?
Well, I've known Marty for about 12 years, and I actually ended up dating his son for about 5.5 years, Jesse, who's in the series, and they were family to me. When this whole thing started, they became my family. Like, it was Christmases with them, Thanksgivings with them. I was over at Marty's house kind of when I needed to get out of LA because he had lived at that point outside of LA a little bit, and we would just kind of go to his ranch house and just hang out there and decompress. And it was amazing. And his family was extremely, extremely supportive, and at times more supportive than some of my own family members. So it was, I will be eternally grateful for how they took me in and just kind of made me theirs. So when I asked Marty to narrate, he's like, it would be my honor. And I was really pleased.
And let's go back, because you talk about, when this all started, it wasn't as if everything was hunky-dory, your dad got sick, and then boom, everybody's estranged. What led up to, well, first off, what was his illness? Because why couldn't he fight for himself? And then what were some of the signs that you saw before his illness that either looking back or maybe at the time you knew, like, okay, this is not going to go well in terms of our getting to see him, take care of him, and, going forward, the next few years are going to be rough?
The first symptoms were kind of memory loss, and I noticed that, and I didn't think anything of it because he was getting older, but it just got worse and worse and worse. And then he was diagnosed with Parkinson's, and then later on Lewy body dementia, which is one of the worst kind of dementias you can possibly get. So it was definitely, the first thing was kind of forgetful and worried, lots of stress. He was so worried, anyways. He's stressed out about everything, but it just got worse and worse and worse. And there were some delusions that came in. And so that's how it started. And then when he got sick enough where he couldn't get out of bed, or he needed help, he was completely shut down and isolated, and we weren't allowed to see him.
Did you have an idea that would possibly happen leading up to that? Or was it like, hey, Jean, what are you doing?
We knew this because she had done this to her own siblings with her own mom. So she kept her siblings away from her mom when her mom was very sick and dying. And we were told that they were not even told when she died. So, and we have eyewitness accounts to that. So when we asked my dad to sign a power of attorney over health so we could help make medical decisions on his behalf, not of the state, not money, he signed it right away. He knew what was happening. He knew what Jean would do.
Let's go back. You growing up in that Kasem household, you've got Casey Kasem as your dad, the American top 40, a voice really of not just one generation, but probably two or three by the time his career was done and he unplugged the microphone. What was it like growing up in the Kasem house?
My dad was, I mean, he was just incredible. My mom and dad were amazing parents. You know, I was a terrible kid. We were like, people called us the terrible trio, me and my brother, my sister. We were horrible. But when we were around my dad, we had perfect manners. Perfect. We were always, you know, just, he taught us to respect, you know, adults. He taught us that work ethic was important. If we asked him to buy us something, especially when we got older, it's like, well, if I buy it for you, you won't take care of it. You won't appreciate it. But if you work and you buy it, then you'll respect it and take care of it and you'll honor it and you yourself will feel good. And he would always give us these life lessons and these stories. And they were helpful growing up. And at first you're like, no, you know, that's horrible. But he was right. He was right. And kindness was the most important thing. Just be kind and help people. And he always gave us these little anecdotes about his life. We'd be driving in the car and he would always tell us little stories of his life and why he does what he does because this happened to him and he learned that lesson. So
what were some of the things that, as you think back to either those lessons or those anecdotes, that really kind of stand out?
Oh, there's so many. Why he stopped drinking coffee, why he stopped smoking, why he
Okay,
stopped
hold on. I got to stop you there. I can't just let you blow past why he stopped drinking coffee.
Yeah, he stopped anything that was, you know, he didn't deem good for him or he didn't feel good on. He stopped and he became a vegan. Nobody knew what a vegan was when he was a vegan. You know, they called him a vegan. I remember going to a party once and there was River Phoenix and his entire family, and River Phoenix had just done one of, you know, his first films and was, you know, famous. And I remember they were the vegan family and I thought it was so cool. And we were at Harvey and Marilyn Diamond's house and they had just written a book on health and there was Sidney Poitier and I'm like, wow, all these vegans. And so it was the first time I knew there were other vegans beside my dad. It was funny.
You're like, hey, wait a minute. We don't have to be the only weird ones on the block.
Yes. But that's the one thing about my dad. He never made us eat the way he did. He taught by example. So we always ask, well, Dad, why aren't you eating meat? You know, why don't you do that? Why? Well, you know, and he'd tell us, or he would take us to the PETA rallies, which today I'm still scarred from. No joke. I have trauma from all the stuff that I have seen. But it made sense to me. And so I've been, you know, lifelong vegan vegetarian. And that was because of my dad.
It's a lot easier now to be vegan. As a vegan, I've been vegan since late 2017. My wife learned that she had cancer and she and I kind of basically said, okay, there's not much we can control in this world. We can control what we put in our bodies. So why don't we go down that road? I will admit right now that I've strayed in the last 3.5 years from that vegan lifestyle at parties because I've forgotten to bring what I need to eat.
Right.
So it happens. It happens.
Yeah.
But it's so easy now.
You know, when we first became vegan, there was one vegan restaurant. It was a Chinese vegan restaurant in Wilshire. And it was, I mean, it was so good. It was I could eat everything on the menu, and it was so awesome. But we're Lebanese, and we were always eating Lebanese food. So that's a lot of that is vegan. The hummus and the tabbouleh and the eggplant and the lentil soup and there's so many dishes that you can make vegan. So, you know, we were always eating that as well.
My mother-in-law has transferred or has kind of translated, I should say, so many Filipino recipes into vegan, and they are so good. They are so good. And it's hard to imagine now in 2021, there being only one vegan restaurant on the West Side. And so it was probably that one, that Chinese vegan, and it was probably Follow Your Heart in the Valley, and that's it.
That's right. Follow Your Heart's been around forever. And I started eating there. It's like 30 years ago, it feels like. So, yeah. But when we were little kids, that was the only one that I remember ever opening. My dad was so excited about it. But his favorite, there were two. He had Madeline's and Real Food Daily, and he always got the club, the vegan club. Oh, he loved that.
And as the child of a celebrity, I would imagine you would have kind of a fork in the road. Like, okay, I can try to go in the family business, or I can go the exact opposite and just kind of live in anonymity. Do you remember if there was that fork in the road, and what did the alternative look like if there was one? Because you've been in radio, you've been in Hollywood, whether it's acting or voicing, you've been in the business. Was there that fork in the road?
I've always wanted to be on stage. I always wanted to sing and dance and be on Broadway. So it went from that. I did a lot of musical theater. I went to school for it. And then I went right into hosting. I did MTV. I was doing tons of radio. So there was never I'm not going to not be in the entertainment business. I loved it. And so there was never that thought of.
Did you have his support? Because he knew all the inner workings. Always.
He said, get your education first and you can do whatever you want. And that was very important to him. So I got half of an education when I did.
Like, yeah. Just we'll throw it out there. What's been some of your would you say highlights? I mean, you had the Sixth Sense on satellite radio with Nikki Sixx. You've had a few things here and there. What kind of stands out as
some of the most fun?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Sixth Sense, because I was such a metalhead growing up, and all I wanted to do was be on the tour buses with the cool rockers. I didn't know what really went on there, but I mean, that was it. So when I get this job and I'm there, I'm doing a show with Nikki Sixx and watching Motley Crue on stage every night with, whether it was Poison or the New York Dolls or Kiss or Alice Cooper, interviewing everyone. I mean, everyone, Beatles, So it was pretty amazing. It was a dream job for sure. I love doing MTV. I was on MTV Asia, MTV USA. The E! Channel was super fun. I had a movie show for the E! Channel that I just absolutely loved. I've done over 20 different kinds of radio shows. My mortgage show I had on for 15 years. So I did mortgage and finance. I actually loved it. I fell in love with doing that. I think it's coming back on. I did political talk shows. I've done pet shows. I've done doctor shows. I'm obsessed with anti-aging. So I convinced a few of my doctors to do radio shows with me. So I love it. I did a show called See America, where I rode a motorcycle to different cities in America. And they were festivals, music festivals, wine festivals, whatever it was. And I got this little Harley Nightster and I rode from city to city, which was fun. Well, we kind of faked some of it, but
it's the magic of television.
A little bit. It would have taken too long if I actually had to ride to each city, but
yeah. Oh, of course. Oh my gosh. Was there ever a moment, like especially early on in your career, where perhaps you knew your dad was listening, or maybe he told you later on that he was listening, and did he give you any kind of advice or feedback, or was it all just, hey?
Always.
Yeah.
Always. My dad listened to almost every show, if his radio wasn't being taken away from him, or he was being literally, we found out some really horrible stuff, but when he tried to listen to my show or my brother's show, he would be battered. So it was hard, but he would, when he had the strength, listen to all of our shows and comments. He was on a few of them. He was very proud of me. He was very proud, but he's saying, maybe you shouldn't say it like that. Or I'm like, but Dad, I'm not about to announce music. I'm opinion. He's like, but you can always give somebody else's opinion that could be, you could state it as their opinion, which really is, but it's not yours. So I'm like, but it's talk radio, so it's a little different. People need to know you and know your opinion. So he didn't want me to get in trouble or have people upset with me. I'm like, but I don't care. Bring it on. I liked to have and hear other opinions, and if I felt very passionate about something, argue my side. And I liked that about radio. I liked that I could be myself.
Yeah, and that's, I think, the evolution of the industry from his announcer days to your host days.
Right. That's right. But he was very proud of me, and I just, I really took after him, and especially when I had to fight for him. My dad being a huge humanitarian for animal rights, for peace in the Middle East. He really stood up for what he believed in, even if it wasn't very popular at that time. But he stood up, and for animal rights, he changed a lot of the farm animal laws that are now in place, and he was arrested for them. And he, he took us to all these PETA marches, and he was against vivisection and animal, fur farms. And it was just, he really stood up for what he believed in, and he put his voice and his money and his time behind it.
You mentioned earlier that it took you 8 months to end up being able to see your father because the judge said, okay, you have, what was it, conservatorship, guardianship?
Egregious elder abuse, yes. And he, the actual letter that came in from my dad's doctor said his wife was putting him in grave danger and could possibly kill him. It had to go that far before I could get guardianship over a man who was married to his wife for 34 years, my dad. So.
Tell me about those 8 months. I obviously a lot of it is of course in the series Bitter Blood, Kasem versus Kasem, but take me through those 8 months, what it was like for you and how you ended up, because there was Stonewall after Stonewall after Stonewall, and as we talked about before, there were times we didn't even know where he was and
right.
which court to go to fight to see him because you had no idea where he was.
That's right. I was told by the first 2 lawyers we had that I'd never win. I got rid of them, fired them after a little while. My brother and sister signed an agreement with Gene outside the courtroom that said that, if they stopped fighting and going for power of attorney and would basically not go to court anymore, they could see my dad. And they signed that. And I said, why would you sign something with somebody who's never told you the truth, with somebody who's constantly in lawsuits, with somebody who lies? I said, you'll never see dad again. And it was it was once or twice a month for under an hour. Had to go in single file. They could not go in with other people. No phone, no computer, no camera, and they had to be in with an armed guard. And I said, Dad's not an inmate. Why would you sign that? And I understood they wanted to see Dad, but you don't sign a deal with the devil. It doesn't make any sense. So I had to fight by myself. I got another lawyer and I continued to fight. I wasn't going to give up until my dad died. There was nothing that was going to stop me. So when I was told it was going to be hard to win guardianship over a wife of 34 years, I said, okay, well then I'll change the law. So every week I was in the Capitol lobbying and getting my bill to different senators and representatives. And we had Representative Mike Gatto at the time pick it up, and my stepdad and my lawyer at the time and Representative Mike Gatto, we all wrote this bill, and it took us 2 years, but we got it. So it actually passed after my dad passed, but I had won the case. I had won guardianship over my dad, which is when I found him when he was taken from his hospital at 3 a.m. after I got a visit with him. He was taken from the hospital, unplugged, his feeding tube unplugged, thrown into a vehicle and taken to 3 different states. And we tracked him down to Washington State. And I brought my guardianship and they said, sorry, that doesn't cross state lines. You'll have to fight all over again. 8 months of fighting. And they said, I'd have to fight all over again. So within just a couple of weeks, I got my dad to the hospital, but at that point it was too late. So if you took a baby out of an incubator, you unplug them and you took them home, is what my stepmother did. She unplugged my dad and took him home. And just a few weeks later, that baby died. That person would be rung up on murder charges and child abuse. But nothing happens if it's somebody who's old.
Take me through because you were with him when he did pass.
And you were with your wife when he passed. And I don't know if you ever experienced this, but being with somebody who is actively dying, and I tried everything to save his life. So a lot of times you heard, oh, they unplugged him. No, this was what the doctors told us after we did everything to save him. It's futile. Your dad is either going to drown in his own liquids if you continue hydrating and feeding him, or he's going to pass naturally. And dying people are not hungry and they are not thirsty. So it's going to be a painful death, or he's going to die naturally and comfortably. What would you do at that point, right? So when my stepmother said we unplugged him, it's like, no, he was going to die either way. And we sat with him for 2 weeks. And it was like a time warp. I don't know if you felt this way, Aron. It was very weird. It was like I've never felt time like that when you were with somebody who is passing. It was, I haven't even talked about this before, really, on air, podcasts, nothing. But what was it like for you? Did you feel that same way?
It was a day and a half. So she went into the hospital on election night, actually. And she should have probably gone into the hospital at some point prior to that. The last time she was in the hospital was around May or June. It was such a miserable experience because it was happening during COVID. No visitors allowed, nothing like that. They wouldn't even let me deliver food to her. At one point, she actually, because the hospital was all kinds of confused as to their policies.
Yeah.
That I delivered food, let's say on a Friday, Saturday, and a Sunday. Come Monday, they're like, oh no, you can't deliver food. And I said, well, what happened the last 3 days? Oh, well, those people shouldn't have done that. It's wrong, And she's upstairs so frustrated because she's dying of cancer. Okay. She's going through chemo. She's eventually going to go through whole brain radiation because it spread to her brain. And she unplugged everything she needed to unplug, walked down to the lobby, and ate what I brought for her as administrators surrounded her just to make sure that, because at that point she's a liability, she's no longer a patient. At that point, she's a liability because they can't afford to have a patient, have something happen to her in the lobby. But it was that miserable experience that was like, I don't want to go back to the hospital. I don't want to go back to the hospital. So that's how you knew that by the time election night came around, she was in that much pain and was suffering that much. A week later, after a thoracentesis to remove fluid from her lungs, by that point, she had such trouble clotting and her blood was so thin that she started to bleed out unknowingly. And about 3 hours after that procedure, she stopped breathing. I was in the room when she stopped breathing.
You got to be in the room?
Because that room or that hospital, thank you, UCLA Santa Monica, the oncology unit, one visitor a day.
Thank God.
Thank God. And that was, honestly, that was the only reason she said, yes, I'll go to the hospital and I'll go to that one only. So
you have the drawn out dying, watching the person go from able to look around, able to moan, able to nod, to right. Just kind of the vacant, stare, to the eyes closed, to the kind of almost the coma, and then the breathing. I cannot tell you.
That was over the course of 2 days. Yeah.
The tubes that they would stick down and try to get him to breathe again. And he's drowning in his own fluids. If you keep giving him fluid, he's just going to drown in the sound I'll never forget, that where he couldn't breathe and the bubbling in his lungs. It was.
Yeah, I get goosebumps just hearing that because it takes me right back there. It takes me right back there.
I can't hear that. And I can work in disaster zones. I've seen dead people. I have helped in hospitals in Haiti. I have seen the worst of the worst of the worst. And just the breath. I thought I was going to be the strong one. I'll tell you something. I could get my dad there and try and save him, but it was there. My sister took over being a physician's assistant and knowing and being around. She did hospice care. She did palliative care. So she knew that I had never heard that death rattle and the breathing and that. It was thinking about it, I never want to hear it again. And I'm okay at hospitals and I'm okay around sick people, but that breathing was, I had to walk out at one point and I was just like, I had to compose myself. And I was there, thank God, when he took his last breath, I was there with him. I was holding him.
It's because you want to hold them. You want to do something. You want to reach inside and fix whatever it is you can fix and whatever it is that's broken. I mean, she texted me the morning. So she stopped breathing at about 5:30 on a Tuesday. That morning, she texted me saying, could you make sure I have going home clothes? because there was a thought that afternoon that maybe the fluid draining would help her condition enough that she could go home.
So, but what caused the bleeding? They didn't see it.
So it was because her blood was so thin,
Yeah.
and there was so much fluid gathering around her lungs, they had to do a procedure to try to drain that fluid. And because she couldn't clot, that procedure caused internal bleeding that they weren't aware of after the procedure. And so it took about 3 hours for enough fluid to fill her chest and abdominal cavity that it pushed her lung, pushed her heart, made her stop breathing.
Yeah.
And that scene, I haven't even described it to her sisters or her mother, because I don't want them to think of anything worse than what I saw. And I know that if I describe what I saw and what I was experiencing, they're going to imagine something even worse, because that's where the imagination goes.
Of course.
But
and you don't want somebody to think of that when they think of their loved one.
Right.
That's not and that's why it's like, I'm done telling the story of the end of my dad's life. After this show, there might be a documentary or a movie about it, but this is it. Like, it's cathartic. Now let's celebrate his life. Let's celebrate what he did and who he was, not the last moments of his life, not the ending of his life, which was so small compared to the life that they have lived, and that's smart. I wouldn't describe it to them. I mean, you don't want that in their heads. My dad died with his brother, my aunt, my brother, my sister, me, and one of his dearest friends, Gons, around him. And I feel like he died on Father's Day, and he died World Elder Abuse Awareness Day today, June 15th. And I think that was a major sign to keep going, because I was already, fighting elder abuse. I had already created Kasem Cares. I had done everything. And I felt like when he passed on World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. Of all the days in the year, 365 days, my dad passes on World Elder Abuse Day and Father's Day of that year. And I felt like that was a sign to just keep going, right? It was just a sign for me. That's how I took it.
Obviously, it was super important to you and so meaningful to you to be there with your father, you and your father. But at some point, I would imagine, as you named all those people, you looked around that room and you saw his family. It's not just you and him, but it's his friends, his brothers. Tell me about how meaningful that was to you. Let's pat you on the back here, that you fighting helped him be surrounded by love. Yes. Instead of shrouded in this mystery city.
That's right. He died knowing he was loved. He died with people around him that were singing to him, playing cards around him, playing baseball shows for him, doing, what he loved. I put everybody on the phone that wanted to say goodbye to him. I put his ear up because I do believe he could hear. It wasn't even about me. It was, I want to give my dad what he needs at this time, and that's his friends and family. And that's what happened. And Jean and Liberty had a court order to be there. They could be there just as much as we could, and they decided not to come. They came for 5 minutes and then went back to Los Angeles. And it's, even as much as I dislike what they did and find it to be truly evil, my dad would have wanted them in that room, and I would have welcomed them in that room. I don't like them, but that's what my dad wanted. And that's what you do at the end of someone's life. You give them what they want. It's not about you anymore.
Have you forgiven them?
No, I won't forgive them. I think forgiving them says it's okay for what you did. And I don't hate them though. I don't hate them. I don't carry anger for them. What they did is it's not forgivable. They tortured my dad. They murdered him. That's how I feel. We could have had another couple of years with him. That's what doctors told us. And that's not forgivable, but I'm not going to carry hate and anger. That kills you, when you hate somebody, you're angry at somebody. That's how they live. And I feel bad for them. they could have had a family who loved them, who embraced them. And, she, from the very beginning, told us we were the old family. It was made it very clear we were the old family, and it got worse and worse and worse every year. It's just pushed us out. There were so many horrible, abusive things she did to us, but it was my dad that, if she had taken care of my dad and she loved my dad and she treated my dad like gold, but treated us poorly, fine. But that's not, she treated everybody around her horribly. And it's just sad. I feel sad for them. I feel like, my half-sister lost out on a family who would have adored her and loved her and supported her. And what can you do? You can't do anything. I do believe my stepmother is a true sociopath. That's my opinion. But I do feel that way because there's no empathy. How do you do that to a human being? How do you just leave your husband in a facility and take off with your boyfriend and don't give him visitors, knowing his kids are in court every week trying to just see their dad? Who does that? But now I know a lot of people do that. Unfortunately, fighting this for 7 years and going up against these people, I see they're cut from the same cloth. And I do believe these are sociopathic personalities that really don't care about human or animal life.
Your association, Kasem Cares, has helped pass laws in how many states now?
We have 12 states that we passed with the Casey Cares Foundation, where we all testified. I went there to the state. And then 9 other states have adopted a version of the Casey Cares bill. And we're working on 4 states coming up, getting more bills passed. I just went to Michigan, testified for the bill. Looks like there's some good support there. Thank you, Senator Ruth Johnson, for doing this, and all the advocates. And my team is amazing at Casey Cares. They really, really are. And here I have a gift to anybody who educates. So whether you're a teacher and you teach in school, or you teach Sunday school, you're in churches or military, if you are an educator, even if you have a decent homeschool, we have a kit, and it's absolutely gorgeous. I should have it here, and I'm not in my house, otherwise I'd show it to you. It's beautiful. It's a hardcover kit. You open it up, there's CDs, lesson plans, booklets of all the 30 human rights that Eleanor Roosevelt really put together. And there's a DVD of all of the human rights done by a brilliant film director. And it's a lesson you could teach for one day or for the entire year, literally lesson plans for an entire year. So, it's a lot of teachers like, gosh, we have to buy our own materials, or I have to create this lesson, or what. Just teaching these human rights empowers kids, empowers adults. So if you go to casemcares.org, you just scroll down slightly, you'll say free educators kit. Please click on that and order it. It's worth, so when you get it, you're going to say, how can you afford to give this for free? But thank you to Youth for Human Rights for doing that. We've teamed up with them for many, many years. And they will. And if you're not an educator, we'll send you a human rights booklet for free. So it's there. And please, please, please take advantage of that. It really is. And if you know somebody who's an educator or a teacher, give it to them as a gift.
And we'll put a link, of course, to the foundation in the show notes. I feel like the last decade or so, you've been working toward, obviously a decade ago, you didn't know that you'd be working toward this, 8-part series on Audible. But as you mentioned yourself, you kind of want to close this chapter and move on to other things. Have you been able to really, over the last 10 years, look at what's next for you? Or it's just been this? And now that you can look at what's next, what is next?
Well, I've always kept my career going. There was a time, a couple years that was hard to do. But I've always had my radio career. I've always done producing. So I've been producing radio, producing TV, and always had a show. So I've never quit. I've always kept working. I'm kind of a workaholic. It makes me happy. If I'm not working, then I'm not happy. So I know what I want to do next, and I have a ton of shows I love to create, and I want to get them on the air. I'm helping my boyfriend produce a couple of his films, which I'm very excited about. His next one's with Ben Vereen, who is, I just adore him. I've been friends with Ben for a very, very long time. If you don't know who Ben Vereen is, look him up. He's a Tony Award-winning actor. He's amazing. So I'm excited for that, and I'm helping my boyfriend with that, and I'm very proud of him and this next movie.
Kerri, you've been a big supporter of mine for many, many years, and the last few weeks we've tried to make this happen a couple of times. Didn't quite happen. Thank you, Zoom. Thank you, Zoom. But no, thank you for this. Thank you for this time, and just your honesty and authenticity, taking us through your emotions. It's not easy. It's not easy to recount over and over, like you mentioned, over and over and over again. You got to tell the story of how your dad passed, how your dad was treated, and it's as much an abuse of your own emotions as it was of his and his person. And to have to relive that over and over again, it takes a lot of strength, and I appreciate you sharing that with us today.
So much. Thank you so much. I do support you, and whatever you choose to do. I honestly, the first time I met you, your voice, and I know people say this to you all the time, I thought you were like this older man. And you're a kid, and I was like, that's Aron Bender? That? You were like a little kid. I swear to God. I mean, it's been a long time since I've known you. And Tim Conway.
Yes, absolutely. Tim Conway Jr. Love that guy.
Forever. And now, you don't really, still don't fit your voice, but it's a little better than like this kid with this booming voice. So yeah, you're so talented. And I thank you so much for having me on and having me share my story.
Thank you, Kerri. Appreciate it. We'll talk soon.
Bye.
Links in the show notes to Bitter Blood, Kasem versus Kasem on Audible, as well as the free human rights kit available at kasemcares.org. Thanks for watching the Aron Bender podcast on DBNA TV, nightly, 11 p.m. Pacific, 2 a.m. Eastern at dbnatelevision.tv, or streaming on the DBNA TV app on Amazon Fire, Roku, and Apple TV. You can find me, all my social media, all the links to all the different podcasts at aronbender.com. Email me guest ideas or comments at aronbendermedia@gmail.com. Be well, and thanks for watching.